In this episode of Cosmic Sponge, Bigfoot's skull is found in British Columbia. Stephen points out we are recording on the 75th anniversary of the Roswell crash. This provides the perfect segue into our main topic discussing the history of the Majestic 12 documents, leading to an exploration into the quality control issues in the alien spaceship industry.
How many have crashed since 1952?
Well, Bob got fired from quality control, so they've been doing much better.
Well, I don't know, man. I hope they came up with some new, warp technology or whatever they use to traverse the stars.
Yeah, I mean, if you get taken out...
what's that come up to? How many average year there? About 3 a year? 3 point, what? 3 point, slightly over 3 a year, right?
Yeah. Well, they're probably sitting there going, we're pretty sure that this design change where we took the brake out and just put 2 gas pedals in isn't working for us.
Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we discuss weird wonders in the world. I'm Stephen Hawk.
And I am Jimmy Coe.
Tonight we are looking into Majestic 12, or MJ-12 for short, the clandestine group of government agents who are in charge of covering up the UFOs and alien bodies that have been recovered and all that. Been around since 1947. So we want to get into that. We want to describe what it is and just give you the history of this alleged organization. Before we get into that, Jimmy, what you been up to this week?
Hey, what would you say if I told you we may now have physical evidence of a Bigfoot?
I would say you're joking.
I'm not joking. B-list celebrity, YouTube personality, wildlife educator, and host of Animal Planet's Coyote Peterson, Brave the Wild, posted a series of photographs on Facebook yesterday that he's claiming could be a large primate skull. To find out, all you have to do is subscribe and hit the notification bell, sign up to his newsletter, and send in $19.95.
Are you joking about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. Listeners, Jimmy did post this story on Facebook. I'm looking at it right now. I mean, what do you think?
Well, some people say it's a bear skull. He claims that he's 100% sure that it's not a bear skull, that it is, in fact, a non-bear skull. He doesn't actually say. He doesn't say what it is.
It says it's recovered in British Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
Listeners, check out our Facebook page if you want to look at this thing. It's a skull, and it's sitting in a mud hole, probably half submerged in the mud hole, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Certainly does have hominid-looking things. The nose looks a bit long, though.
Bigfoot researcher Alexander Petakov was quick to point out the similarities between the skull displayed in these pictures from Peterson and a replica of a lowland gorilla skull.
So this individual's saying they think it's a hoax?
Yeah, he says, nice try. Here's the exact skull replica used in this stunt, he said in response to the images before sharing a link to a seemingly identical skull available for sale online.
I see. Well, as with most things like this, it's always too good to be true. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum claims he's a professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University.
Bigfoot
proponent.
A large... He believes in Bigfoot.
He does. But he says before everyone gets their knickers in a knot, in my opinion, this is most likely a model of a gorilla skull obtained from a source such as Bone Clones or Skullduggery. I guess those are 2 companies that produce these kinds of things.
Yeah.
He said there's no question it is a gorilla, not a Sasquatch or a bear. The burden of proof rests with Coyote. Again, since 1995, hit subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell on Coyote's page to get more information on this fake gorilla skull.
We found out it was just a fake skull. Somebody planted it there.
We got punked.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
A bunch of Sasquatch going around planting fake skulls all over the place.
Yeah. I remember a number of years ago, really before the days of social media, this news story going around about a dead Sasquatch. Mm-hmm. And it was like laying in a boat or something like that, like somebody had killed it. But then upon a closer examination, it was an empty gorilla suit. All right. But at first, the way it was laying and everything kind of looked like Like, oh man, somebody found a Sasquatch, a dead one, or killed one, or whatever.
Uncle Jed bagged one.
Uncle Jed.
It tastes like bear.
Tastes like plastic. Do you know what today is? Today could be considered a very significant anniversary by some.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know?
Let's see. Today is, listeners, the day we're recording is July the 8th. So, sounds familiar.
Would you like me to tell you?
Oh, I would love to hear this.
It is the 75th anniversary of Roswell.
Wow. On a day we're recording. Fantastic. We should be doing something on Roswell. And we actually are.
We are doing it a little bit on Roswell, Majestic 12. See, this could have been a segue, but guess not. Anyway, yeah, this is actually July 8th was the day that the story broke in the newspaper, the Roswell Dispatch.
Mm-hmm.
It was dated at July 8th. So it's been 75 years since a Project Mogul balloon crashed that was misidentified as a flying saucer by one. Am I getting ahead of myself?
I think so. I think what you meant to say was that 2 flying saucers crashed into Project Mogul and landed in the desert.
Right.
Crashed in the desert.
Right. One landed, and there was archaeology students that saw it, and the Army come and collected everything, and there was one little alien walking around, still alive.
Well, yeah, one alive and another 3 that were unfortunately deceased.
Well, it depends on the story. Some have as many as 8.
Sometimes they multiply when they're dying.
I guess. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, that's my news piece. Nothing really new to report there other than this story that won't die.
What are you going to do?
We're going to do a story like Majestic 12.
That's what we're going to do.
That's our 75th anniversary special. We should have, you know what? I should have just led with the whole thing and called it the 75th Roswell anniversary special.
Yeah, you should have done that. Where were you, man?
I don't know what I was thinking. It just now occurred to me, though. See?
Yeah. Missed opportunity. If only we could go back and edit the beginning.
There's no way. It's too much work. I'm not going to go back and pretend or edit a bunch of stuff. Way too much. Unless you want to edit it.
No, if I edit it, I'm going to go back and make something goofy at the beginning.
You do that anyway.
That's right. Wait till you hear my introduction to this one.
Well, presumably we already have.
That's
other than me.
Exactly.
Oh, shall we move on, Jimmy?
Yes, please. Let's get on with it.
Before we move on to tonight's topic, I once again would ask you to please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. Check out cosmicsponge.com. There you can find links to all of our episodes. We also have a web store, links to buy me a coffee if you'd like to do a one-time donation to support the show, or if you would like to become a Patreon supporter and gain access to another show we do exclusively for our Patreon supporters called Weird Wonders, then just look for the link on our webpage and you can find it. Or you can go to patreon.com/cosmicsponge.
Mm-hmm.
Contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com.
And with that?
Yeah, on to tonight's main topic, as we said at the beginning of the show, on the special 75th anniversary of Roswell edition of Cosmic Sponge, we are going to be uncovering the mystery of Majestic 12, or MJ12. So, Jimmy, I know you've done some legwork on this one. How about kicking us off tonight?
William Shatner took off his cowboy hat, tore off his shirt, and oiled up. Just moments before 2 cultists grabbed him by the arms and brought him before Ernest Borgnine, a satanic leader with one heck of a smile.
I've seen that movie.
Devil's Reign would prove to be one of those films that would end up on a VHS tape that the low blockbuster would use to hold the doors open when the AC was on the fritz. Yep, not even Tom Preston, Eddie Albert, or John Travolta could save that film from the bin labeled "Things We Use to Level Tables at the Taco Bell." However, if you were to sit through the credits, you would be rewarded with the additional crew video credit assigned to a one Mr. Jamie H. Shandera. Little did anyone know at the time, Mr. Shandera would be the recipient of a manila envelope containing proof positive the existence of aliens, crashed UFOs, and captured EBs. Yep, we're talking about the Majestic 12 documents, also known as MJ12, or just plain old magic. Shandera was in the process of working on materials related to the UFO topic with William Moore when he received the roll of 35mm film containing photographs of what appeared to be official government documents detailing a top-secret organization formed by an executive order issued by President Truman. This organization was formed with the express purpose of addressing the extraterrestrial issue. Shandera and Moore, with the help of Stanton Friedman, decided to validate the material before going public. Shandera, however, would not be the only individual to receive a roll of film of the documents, and in short order, another UFO researcher published the documents as part of a UFO book, and with that, the cat was out of the bag. Eventually, the FBI would become involved and would ultimately determine the documents to be fake, as expected, writing the word bogus across each of the prints before including them as part of an official FBI case file, after which a split in the UFO community took place, with one group regarding the documents as a hoax and the other as official canon for the government cover-up of the biggest story in the history of mankind. Tonight we're going to explore their contents, their provenance, and weigh in on what we think about the legitimacy, or lack thereof, of the MJ-12 documents.
I think we need to recognize that this is all part of the government UFO conspiracy cover-up. Whenever you see a History Channel special or something, this is just kind of perpetuating that idea that the government has these individuals that not only are covering up the truth about aliens and UFOs, but are also actively working on witnesses to either discredit them or pressuring them not to talk about their experiences. I guess in some circles, these could be even the Men in Black. I know some UFO researchers have talked about the Men in Black acting very strangely, as if they're actually aliens and trying to tamp down the whole UFO phenomenon. But I think also Men in Black government agents would be part of this Majestic 12 or Magic or MJ-12 organization. But let's get into the history of what we're talking about. So Stanton Friedman was a UFO researcher, passed away in 2019. Very famous. He was a physicist, so he had the scientific credentials, had started researching flying saucers, as he called it, sort of as a pastime, and then eventually it became his living. And he was the author of several books, did a lot of research, and really, I would say, was the origin of the government cover-up, of the UFO cover-up. In 1979, he met a man named Jesse Marcel, who was the intelligence officer at the Air Force Base in Roswell, New Mexico, when a very famous newspaper article came out that said that the U.S. government had captured a flying saucer. So listeners, at this point, I don't want to rehash the whole history of Roswell, what we discovered whenever we researched this, but go back and listen to episode 48 and 49. The Roswell cover-up uncovered. That will explain how that story got started. And it really started with Jesse Marcel, who was this intelligence officer and had a story to tell Stanton Friedman when he was in the military in 1947 that there was a crashed flying saucer in the New Mexico desert and that he was there, had recovered parts of this flying saucer. In 1980, there was a book published. It was written by William L. Moore and Charles Bertlitz called The Roswell Incident. It was the very first Roswell book, and we covered that in those two episodes and talk a lot about that. So Stanton Friedman did a lot of research and did some interviews and also contributed to the book. And in that, of course, they tell the whole Roswell story about the crashed flying saucers, recovered aliens. And since then, the belief became that there is a government conspiracy to cover up flying saucers that have come from another planet along with the little gray aliens, and that the government recovered all this and has been covering up this entire incident along with several other crashed flying saucers and the reversal of alien technology and just all of the conspiracy stuff that you've heard about since then. It all began there. A few years later, to reinforce that idea, some government documents were found.
And so what we have going specifically with the origins or the provenance of the MJ-12 documents, it starts with this manila envelope that Shandera receives, but he's not the only one to receive the copy. There are other UFO researchers that receive it, one of which is Timothy Good. He took his copy to the press in the spring of 1987. They received it, that would be Shandera and Moore, received their copy in 1984.
This is the same William L. Moore
Yes.
that wrote the Roswell incident, the very first Roswell book. Claims that he also received these secret documents that had been leaked from someone within the bowels of the government.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit of information on that, too. So in 1984, Shandera receives his copy, and then others, I guess across time, start receiving the same copy of this 35 millimeter film roll of these documents. The first thing they want to do is they want to elicit the assistance of Stanton Friedman to verify these documents. They go to the National Archives. They start looking to see if they can find anything that cross-references or matches up. They come to the conclusion that they believe at least some of the documents are real. But by the time it gets out to the public in 1987, they still haven't made a decision about how valid these documents are. And they decide to go forward with their publication as well, since they got beaten to the press with Timothy Good's book. They decided to put out their own book. And, of course, it blows up in the media. And under intense pressure, the government's required to investigate these documents and determine whether or not they have a leak. And when they go to do that, they come up with this conclusion from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations that they are hoax documents, fabrications. In their words, completely bogus. From that, the FBI then takes it upon themselves to grab the biggest crayon they got in their drawers and write bogus across all of the documents before making them available to the public.
So you can actually find the Majestic 12 documents on the FBI's website. And as Jimmy said, they wrote bogus across in very large letters all the way across each one of the pages. Some info in here about the communication is classified in a marked out secret in its entirety. There's a little bit of redacted information. Now that's the FBI's official documents, and discusses about their investigation. The various UFO investigators said that these documents were provided to them through some kind of leak. So allegedly, after the UFO crash, and supposedly there's some other UFO crashes, this document was put out by Harry S. Truman, who was president at the time. It says Operation Majestic 12 is a top secret research and development intelligence operations strictly only for the president. Talks about naming it Majestic 12. And the reason they call it that is because there's 12 members. Now, some of the members are James Forrestal, Nathan Twining, who was in charge of Materials Command. He's a figure in the UFO, early days of the UFOs. Hoyt Vandenberg was in charge of the Air Force. Let's see that. And I remember that astronomers on here. Yeah, Donald Menzel. He was a very open critic in the 1950s of UFOs. Every time there was a UFO report, he would publish some way to debunk it and what he thought it was. So these secret members are the ones that are supposed to be researching all this information, and it's only for the president, and it's above top secret, and nobody knows about this organization, and they report directly to the president. In the memo, it talks about the Kenneth Arnold sighting, concerns of hysteria in the public, and then they talk about July 7th, 1947, the first operation began to secure the recovery of the wreckage of flying saucer for scientific study. And that's what these documents do. They essentially are saying that the government set up this secret organization, named it MJ-12, chose these members that would get together secretly and work on researching the flying saucers and covering up the fact that we are being visited or invaded by aliens from another planet. And that's what these MJ documents are.
So they're not without their problems.
Right.
And there's been several books written in support and against them. And in one case, Stan Friedman agrees that some of those documents are hoax, but then supports the idea that some of them are not. So he's being selective in which ones he thinks are real and which ones aren't.
Well, I know Stanton Friedman, I mean, he pretty much invented this UFO government cover-up conspiracy, or uncovered it, however you want to look at it. He was a big supporter of the MJ-12 documents. Now, it's not to say everyone is. In fact, some very dedicated UFO researchers think they're a hoax.
Yeah, and that's the split in the community. And things get messy as time goes on. More people review the documents, and they come to different conclusions. Some of the problems is with the language used in some of the documents. There's some anachronistic issues where you have certain words being used that weren't used at the time, such as media, instead of using the word press. That's a clear giveaway that something fishy is going on with documents that go back to 1947. How you get a roll of film like Stanton Friedman does and look at it and then come to the conclusion that somebody hoaxed some of these documents and some of them are real. I don't know how you get there, because the minute I find out 1, 2, or 3 of them, or even half of them, or all of them but one is a hoax, I'm just assuming all of them are a hoax. It's just some are better perpetrated than others. So I don't know how he reaches that conclusion, but I haven't read his book, intend to. He has a book out on specifically just on Majestic 12. He's actually got 2 books on it. I think the first book probably covers most of the information and material. I don't know, man. I mean, those 2 things alone for me immediately send up warning signals.
I think that it's interesting. I mean, listeners, whether you've listened to episodes 48 and 49 about Roswell cover-up, uncovered, we came to the conclusion that the Roswell incident really was not a crash flying saucer. Based on all of the evidence, I think it's pretty clear. I know there's been a lot of witnesses to come out of the woodwork through the years who said they saw it or whatever, but the entirety of the Roswell incident being a flying saucer was based on Jesse Marcel alone. There were other witnesses that were still alive when this story broke, and were still alive in the 1990s when the Air Force published 2 separate reports on the Roswell incident. All of the other witnesses who was right there, in fact, one of them, the CNC officer, recognized that it was a balloon. It was a top secret project called Project Mogul, and that's why there was a little bit of a cover-up. The weather operator was in General Ramey's office. He was still alive, and he was interviewed. He recognized exactly what they are. The radar targets. If you listen to those episodes, though, we go into a lot of detail about why we drew these conclusions. But right now in the UFO community, it's widely believed that in 1947 that this UFO crashed. And there's been other stories and books and things. I ran across on the internet, there's a website called Above Top Secret. There's a forum there. There's a lot of information on there. Very, very pro UFO. It's, all about Majestic 12 and the secret government. I found an article by William Cooper. It's called Majestic 12 and the Secret Government. I'm just going to read a couple of highlights out of it. And what I'm trying to say is it's the Roswell incident sort of flowered into this huge conspiracy. This whole government cover-up conspiracy theory. Now, I want to be clear. I think there is something to the UFO phenomenon, but I don't think anything happened other than essentially what they said had happened. I don't think there was a crash flying saucer there. I think it was a balloon, and it was either misidentified or Jesse Marcel enjoyed telling tall tales. I don't know. There was just no evidence, very little evidence. A lot of evidence to the contrary that it was a flying saucer. But here's a good example of just how much this has grown. This article by William Cooper, he talks about the days directly following World War II that, we exploded atomic bombs and essentially drew the attention of an alien race. Between January 1947 and December 1952, at least 16 crashed or downed alien craft and 65 alien bodies and 1 live alien have been recovered. An additional alien craft had exploded and nothing was recovered from the incident. Of all these incidents, 13 occurred within the borders of the United States.
Somebody in the flying saucer industry is going to get in trouble for their quality assurance.
Well, yeah, that's sort of what I started thinking, too. I'm like, well, how many flying saucers are visiting us from another planet, right?
Bob, and quality control sucks.
This is a 5-year span, okay? I'd seriously, 16 of these craft have crashed. I mean, I'm like, man, if that were Boeing or something, man, they'd be out of business, right? The Boeing Flying Saucer Factory. An alien craft was found on February 13th, 1948 on a mesa near Aztec, New Mexico. That's the famous Aztec one. Mm-hmm. Another craft was located March 25th, 1948 in Hart Canyon near Aztec, New Mexico. It was 100 feet in diameter. A total of 17 alien bodies were recovered from those 2 craft. And this, according to this website, is where the secrecy really began. A special group of America's top scientists were organized, and a program under the name Project Sign was created to study the phenomenon. But it contained a shroud of secrecy. And of course, the first victim of the cover-up who was on the Majestic 12 panel was James Forrestal. He was very idealistic and religious who believed that the public should be told. When he began to talk to leaders of the opposition party and leaders of Congress about the alien problem, he was asked to resign by Truman. He expressed his fears to many people and rightfully believed that he was being watched. This was interpreted by those who were ignorant of the facts as paranoia. Forrestal later was said to have suffered a mental breakdown and was admitted to Bethesda Naval Hospital, and he hung himself, right?
Nope. He was pushed. I mean, he fell out of a 16th floor window after being committed for depression.
Yeah, it is strange that Forrestal, being a highly placed government official, did commit suicide after, jumping out of the window. So, but of course, a lot of people say that was MJ-12 making, shutting that guy up or whatever, right?
Right.
Or the CIA.
Right outside of the hospital. Two men in black suits were asked about the event, and they said, "Oh yeah, we saw it from, let's say, down here. He jumped."
Right. So, that's where we are now, right? I mean, websites like this, or even the History Channel, is just as bad. I mean, they have stories about Roswell and everything all the time. Let's get into some of the issues with the MJ-12 documents. I mean, there are some people that are going to believe they're real regardless. Doesn't matter. It's just like, okay, the FBI examined them and said they were all bogus. I mean, of course, whenever somebody says these are leaked government documents, the Air Force and the FBI are going to be concerned if it's real.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know where the leak is. It could be other very sensitive information about our weapons systems going to a foreign agent. They definitely investigated it and concluded that it was bogus. But now there's been a few skeptics that have looked at this and have really pointed out some problems with these documents.
Well, before you go on, I have a question for you. So, let's say I'm a secret agent man, and I've discovered these documents. I've taken photos of them.
Yeah.
And I take the roll of film, I put them in an envelope, I put a return address. Well, I don't put a return address. We just see from the stamp that it comes from, I think it was Albuquerque, New Mexico. And and I put it in the post office. I'm sitting there, and I'm at the post office, and I'm like, okay, who am I going to send this to? Let's see.
I thought of that.
There's 60 Minutes. Nah, I don't send it 60 Minutes. See, I could send it to ABC News. Nah. NBC News. Nah. CBS News. Who watches CBS? I'm going to send it to a UFO guy in Burbank.
I thought of that too.
That guy who had the credit on Devil's Reign.
Yeah, man, that movie's so bad. It's so funny. I saw that on. This has only been within the past 6 months. I saw it on Prime. I thought, hey, man, I'm going to watch this. I know it's going to be bad, and I like bad movies. That movie was so bad, I couldn't even finish it. I mean, I like bad movies, okay? I like bad B movies. I'm a big fan of the old Mystery Science Theater 3000 show. Uh-huh. But, yeah, that was a tough one. William Shatner, put down that Bible.
I love it when
You're
he
not
points.
a man of God.
He points like this. I'm pointing right at the camera. Was really close. It's weird.
That was it's 3D.
Yeah, it's a weird angle.
Yeah, that's it's a really bad William Shatner.
But seriously, are you going to send this out to a bunch of UFO groups? And why would you do that instead of sending it to like a? Okay, I want to hear it.
If you send it directly to CBS and NBC or any of those, or you send it to the New York Times, well, I don't know, maybe the New York Times. We'll get into that story another day.
Yeah.
If you send it to a mainstream outlet, they're immediately going to discard it. They're going to say this is just some crazy hoax thing, right? And just throw it away. The reason you send it to a UFO investigator is because that person already has a belief that UFOs are real, and especially someone like Stanton Friedman or William L. Moore, who are already investigating and have investigated the Roswell incident and the government cover-up. So if you send it to them and let them research it even further, there's somebody who's going to publish a book and get it out to the public because they are in the know. They know that this is real. If you send it off to a mainstream, they're going to say this is some crackpot. They'll never investigate it.
Okay.
So, I mean, I see what you're saying.
That's a good argument. That's a good argument.
They actually, if they were real and that whole thing was real, that would be probably the most logical place to send that stuff to someone who already has a foot over the line of belief. But the problem with something like that anyway is there's no corroboration. Even if it wasn't a hoax, it's very difficult to believe that it actually exists because there's no other documentation. You can't go to the Truman Presidential Library and look these documents up. I mean, anything like that, anything that would be released top secret like that, I mean, there's just no way to verify it unless it someday becomes declassified.
So what kind of errors do you think exist in this, or the ones that have been pointed out, other than the ones we've already mentioned?
Have you read what Philip Klass wrote about it? And I know a lot of times we joke about him, but he actually come up with some pretty good ones on this one.
I know he had mentioned, and he laid down a challenge with regards to the typeface, the font that was used. To which I think Stanton Friedman replied and got $1,000 off of Philip Klass for providing examples of that from the archives.
One of the original M12 documents released by William L. Moore and has two partners, Stanton Friedman and TV producer Jamie Shandera of, what's the name of that movie?
Devil's Reign.
Of Devil's Ring fame. Devil's Reign.
Yeah, because at the end, remember, it rains and it disintegrates everybody, except for Ernest Borgnine. He makes it.
I don't think I made it that far into it. The document, of course, shows that it authorized the creation of MJ12 group. So one criticism that Philip Klass came up with was the dating system on the hybrid combination of civilian and military formats was unusual in those days. And William L. Moore, however, uses that format in his own personal letters. That's what he thinks. That's why he thinks William L. Moore is who actually created these documents. But I think that's where the $1,000 bet came from that you were talking about. Mm-hmm. That they did find some dating like that, in which Philip Klass left. And also Stanton Friedman said he never paid him. I do remember that in an interview that I saw.
There is some hard physical evidence that was discovered in terms of one of the documents, MJ12 documents, and that is the one that contains Harry Truman's signature. This is a clear fabrication or evidence of forgery because before the advent of the Xerox era and signature machines, the very existence of two identical signatures was considered to be very strong evidence of forgery, according to the book Question Documents by Albert S. Osborne, published in 1978. He notes that the fact that two signatures are very nearly alike is not alone necessarily an indication of forgery of one or both, but the question is whether they are suspiciously alike. The Harry Truman signature on the MJ12 Truman memo of September 24th, 1947 is suspiciously like the signature on a letter that Truman wrote to Vannevar Bush on October the 1st, 1947, the original of which I found in the Bush collection in the manuscript division of the Library of Congress and made several photocopies there. Now, this comes from a document provided by Philip J. Klass, and he goes into a lot of detail, going so far as to note that after submitting the documents to a expert professional, expert document examiner in Washington, D.C., he says that he was informed by this expert in documentation that the Truman memo had already been exposed as a hoax because it was written on a typewriter that did not exist in 1947. He was told that the discovery had been made by a highly respected document examiner whose name and telephone number he provided to Klass, and he refers to it later in the document as PT because of his reluctance to become a public figure in the MJ12
right.
controversy.
It doesn't want to get embroiled in the UFO debate. I can understand that. So what we're talking about here is if you look at someone's signature, think about your own signature. A handwriting expert can tell if that's my signature. They watch me sign it. But what we're talking about here is not only is it President Truman's signature, but it's exactly like the signature on this other document that is on public record. Nobody signs their name precisely the same way every time. It's impossible. But not only that, there are some stray pen marks near it, like the pen touched the paper and made a little mark beside his signature. Those are also part of the signature on the M12 document and the identical signature on the real document that it obviously was taken from. In other words, somebody took a real document that exists in the public record, found a signature of Harry S. Truman, back in the 80s would have used a Xerox machine or something, and photocopied it all on there. It's pretty cut and dry. I think that alone proves that everything's fake. And then I just think it's impossible. Like, Stanton Friedman's like, okay, well, maybe that's fake, but I think the rest of this is real, or it's based on something real. I mean, it's difficult for me to believe that just because of these very obvious errors in the creation of it. And isn't there even word that William L. Moore had told someone previously, had proposed to someone who later said that William Moore told me he wanted to perpetuate a set of hoax documents in the hopes that real people in the government would come forward and tell their story, right?
Yeah.
Of the existence of UFOs. In other words, he believes there were UFOs. He believes there's a government cover-up, and he believes the government is hiding alien bodies and alien technology, but hoaxed it to help perpetuate the idea and reveal it to the public, even though the document's not exactly true. The idea of it is true, and that he hoped to encourage people who had stories, like people who were in the military and witnessed these things, would come forward.
Yeah, it gets even more bizarre in the late 80s. Like in 1989, Bill Moore comes out to a MUFON conference and publicly announced that for years, even since before he had seen the MJ-12 documents, he had been doing deals with the Air Force, where in exchange for information, he would spy on the people in the UFO community. And the reason is there was a concern that there were Soviet elements within the UFO community causing havoc in the public, feeding misinformation and that kind of stuff. So, in a counter-disinformation project, the Air Force was feeding Bill Moore information. And this is when he becomes ostracized from the UFO community. They'll have nothing to do with him after this.
Right. He admitted that he was spying on it. But again, we have another episode, of course, called The History of UFOs, back episode 3 and 4, parts 1 and 2. Early in the UFO phenomenon, the government was open. The Air Force was open to talking about it. And it was obvious they were concerned about UFOs suddenly being seen everywhere. Their big concern by the 1950s, whenever they put together a top secret panel to study the phenomena called the Robertson Panel, they were more concerned with the Soviet Union, the communists, exploiting the UFO hysteria that was going on in America, and that it could undermine our government and our society. That was their concern. Their concern was not UFOs or flying saucers. Their concern was that this phenomena could be exploited by a foreign entity and somehow leave us unprepared for invasion or subversion. It's possible that William Moore, yes, the government, certain aspects, the CIA, they wanted to know even as late as the 1980s, because the Cold War was still around, the Soviet Union was still around. They wanted to know if UFO groups were being infiltrated by communists, members of the Communist Party.
Victor.
That's absolutely, comrade.
Grab tinfoil hat and we go to Kansas UFO conference.
Yeah. So, that's all known. That's part of the declassified documents that are out there. So a lot of the cover-up and the nefarious agents trying to tamp down UFOs is not because you're getting too close to the truth and discovering alien bodies and alien visitation. It's because they don't want the hysteria. And if you go back and listen to episodes, I think, 3 and 4, Jimmy, of the history of UFO, we go into it at a great deal of detail about the Robertson Panel and how they drew these conclusions. And that was when the government stopped being open about flying saucers and UFOs. And there's a declassified document that I always refer to whenever the MJ-12 stuff comes up. In 1947, the Roswell crash was supposed to have happened 75 years ago on July 7th, 1947. Let me find the document.
You know what? If there's that much quality control with flying saucers and that many bodies, I mean, they'd be raining down everywhere. Somebody's bound to see them. I mean, and take pictures.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if there's been that many crashed saucers, then I think it would be difficult to actually keep that covered up because, I mean, how many times would it crash in a remote area,
right,
like Roswell, New Mexico? I mean, the next time it might crash in a field in West Virginia or Mississippi.
It crashes in a field in West Virginia. I've seen what they do when they see deer that have been hit by cars. They just pull offside the road, cut off the antlers and head. There's going to be somebody with a bunch of alien heads in their cabin.
Well, yeah. But the one thing that I always point back to is the declassified. Often in the UFO phenomenon is General Nathan Twining, who was in charge of Materials Command. He was instrumental in the formation of Project Sign, which was the predecessor to Project Blue Book. Nathan Twining is always mentioned in UFO, any time of historical look at UFOs when the phenomena first began because of his rank and what he did. So he is allegedly on this Majestic 12 panel that was created of the original 12. But if a UFO would have crashed in 1947, that was in July, okay? But we have an unclassified document or a declassified document from September 23rd, 1947, where Twining was asked to look into this UFO phenomena because it was still very new. It was less than a year old. These are some of the things he wrote. This was his opinion concerning flying discs, is what they called it. A, the phenomena is real and not visionary or fictitious. The objects probably approximating the shape of a disc of such appreciable size as to appear to be as large as a man-made aircraft. C, there is a possibility that some of the incidents may be caused by natural phenomena, such as meteors. D, the reported operating characteristics such as extreme rates of climb, maneuverability, particularly in roll, and motion, which must be considered evasive when sighted or contacted by friendly aircraft and radar, lend to belief to the possibility that some of the objects are controlled either manually, automatically, or remotely. His recommendation, of course, was to form a group to study the phenomena further, which again, that was the beginning of Project Sign, which was the forerunner of Project Blue Book, which was the Air Force's investigation of the flying saucer and UFO phenomena all the way until it was closed in 1969. This is a real document. We know it is. It was declassified. At one time, it was considered top secret. But if there was a crashed UFO, a crashed flying saucer that hit the desert in 1947, in July of 1947, and they've recovered these alien bodies, and Nathan Twining is on this Majestic 12 panel, according to those documents that were recovered in the 1980s, allegedly, then why did he make this memo where all he's talking about is that his evidence points to that it's a real phenomenon, discusses the nature of what the crafts are like when they're flying and stuff. I mean, I think if the crashed UFO thing was real, his memo would be quite different, don't you think?
Well, unless the puppet masters got to him and stuffed that thing in the back of his head.
Right. I mean, and
Wrapped
that's
around
the
his
thing,
spine.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, and no matter what, you can always say, oh, well, this is just a cover-up. I mean, we're to believe that he made a fake memo in September just in case someday there's a Freedom of Information Act that may be passed in the 1970s that will allow for investigators look for this document that was made over 50 years ago.
I'm sensing sarcasm in the room. I'm sensing just a bit of sarcasm.
Well, again, it's just how unlikely the Roswell, the Majestic 12 stuff, as much as we enjoy watching shows about it, like to believe that, and I know there's been 100 TV shows, the X-Files, and it's all about government cover-up and the clandestine government within a government and all that kind of stuff. I think it's all fiction. I just don't, and I know we weren't planning to give our opinions on this episode. But man, once I start getting into it, it just seems so improbable to me.
Okay, well, let me blow your mind. That wasn't the only documents that were released. In March of 1994, a second roll of film was sent to Maryland's UFO enthusiast group. The return address was this time for a drugstore in La Crosse, Wisconsin. No one from the store admitted to sending the film. The new document was an operations manual dated April 1954 and provides more circumstantial evidence for the existence of MJ-12. Investigative journalist Linda Moulton-Howe is it Moulton-Howe or Moulton-Howe?
Moulton-Howe, I think.
Yeah.
I got to pee, man. I'll be right back. Let's take a quick break.
Okay. While he's gone, we haven't talked about Mothman in a while. And we're thinking about heading over to the Mothman Festival this year. It's been canceled the last few years, so we already have rented out a place right across the Silver Bridge there, from Point Pleasant over into Galapagos. I think that's what it is, in Ohio. And we're going to stay over in Ohio, as there's not a lot of room on the West Virginia side there. And we're going to go down and hang out and check the place out. Maybe we'll see some of our listeners there. I don't know that we'll get a booth or anything like that, but I don't know. Could be a lot of fun. Still waiting for Steve. He had to go pee because he's got an old man's bladder. He had it imported and then inserted. Because when Mothman gets started, Mothman doesn't stop.
Oh, talking about the Mothman while I'm relieving myself again, I see.
Perhaps.
I hear.
Back to our story.
Back to our regularly scheduled program.
Investigative journalist Linda Moulton-Howe has meticulously studied the booklet. Through her research, she confirmed the War Office stamp utilized on the booklet was used up to the 1960s. Even more interesting, a retiree from the governmental printing office was consulted and felt it was highly plausible the pamphlet had come from the office he worked in.
He worked in the UFO recovery office?
I guess, yeah. That's where he worked.
Okay.
And he says this, this was done on a monotype. I used it. And the Z would collect dust. The dust accumulation caused the key to stick. As a result, the Z's in the documents typed on the machine would be raised. All the Z's in the manual were similarly raised.
Say, I've seen this manual. Have you seen
I haven't seen it. No.
It looks as if someone had the booklet. It's essentially an instruction manual for what you're supposed to do when you're recovering one of these crashed flying saucers. It would be handed out to the soldiers, let's say. It goes through all the instructions, how to handle the public, to be careful around certain materials and all that. It looks as if someone is holding the manual and taking pictures of it, like as if they're trying to do it, take pictures and then put the book back, like maybe only so many would be accounted for or something like that. And there's like a picture of a thumb, where they're pulling the pages down and it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what they say it is. It's this instruction manual. So it's pretty neat. I mean, I think it looks cool.
Yeah. Now, some of these documents in this second roll film, another document, this time slightly burned on the surface, is a signed memo from Alan Dulles, the director of the CIA, warning, quote, "You must know Lancer has made some inquiries regarding our activities which we cannot allow." And Lancer was the Secret Service name for Kennedy. The memo used the Soviet euphemism Vetvork as a stand-in for assassination. If Kennedy kept digging, something would need to be done, and so they wasted him. This ties into the Kennedy assassination. It gets bigger and bigger with each passing day. Douglas Caddy, the lawyer who represented the former CIA officer E. Howard Hunt during the Watergate scandal, claims he got Hunt to admit Kennedy's death was motivated by aliens. This is an interaction that supposedly occurred following a shared dinner one evening. Caddy says, "Why was John Kennedy assassinated?" Hunt says, "John Kennedy was assassinated because he was about to give our most vital secret to the Soviet Union."
Flying saucers.
Yeah, Caddy says, "Our most vital secret?" And Hunt says, "The alien presence." Presents, I said, not presents. It's not like they're giving gifts away. Hunt then reportedly calmly walked out into the night. It was Boxing Day. Boxing Day for aliens. Well, not having any of that in the United States of America, I tell ya. Kennedy's got to go. So that's interesting. I mean, we've got somebody who claims that the typewriter used to print that booklet is the same typewriter that he used to print other booklets from the U.S. UFO Recovery Department in the operation of secret stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, pull it up, man. Take a look at it. Go to specialoperationsmanual.com.
Special.
I want you to look at it.
Operations.
Or you can just type in SOM1-01. That's what it's supposed to be, Special Operations. So these are the scanned images. So it says restricted, SOM1-01, Majestic 12, Group Special Operations Manual, top secret, eyes only, all that stuff. Gives some warnings, but I think there's some fun. And then again, there's the fingers where they took pictures of it. Ooh. Are you on there?
Yeah, manicured.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It shows the index, extraterrestrial entities and technology, recovery and disposal. Let's see if I can zoom in on some of these.
Here's one that says, our role-play group will meet next Thursday.
Doesn't say that.
No, it doesn't say that.
Here it says, like, stupid.
I'm not allowed to see this because I don't have magic eyes.
Yeah.
What are magic eyes? they're the ones watching you. Magic eyes, they're watching you. They're watching your every move.
What's that? Is that what's his name?
Is that Hall & Oates?
No.
Who is that?
Isn't that no, Billy Idol, right? No, it's Eyes Without a Face. I don't know. Oh yeah, Hall & Oates, you're right.
I thought
watching you. Yeah. Magic eyes, they're watching you.
Clap, clap.
Magic eyes.
They're watching you.
Yeah.
That song is about MJ-12.
It's about MJ-12. See, that is special code words is what's going on.
Hall & Oates are part of the conspiracy.
They are. Here's a good example of one of the things. It says, General, MJ-12 takes the subject of UFOBs, extraterrestrial technology, and extraterrestrial biological entities very seriously and considers the entire subject to be a matter of the very highest national security. For that reason, everything relating to the subject has been assigned to the very highest security classification. 3 main points will be covered in this section. The general aspects of MJ-12 to clear up any misconceptions that anyone may have, the importance of the operations, and the need for absolute secrecy of the operation. Just a little example of some of the text out of there.
Little note on this says, God damn it, Frank, stop taking my food out of the refrigerator. I have it labeled.
Yeah, the booklet goes into some of the different types of humanoids. Here's the EBE Type 2. These entities are humanoid but differ from Type 1 in many respects. They are bipedal, 3 feet 5 inches, or 3 feet 5 inches to 4 feet 2 inches in height and weigh 25 to 50 pounds. Proportionally, the head is much larger than humans or Type 1 EBEs. EBE, of course, is extraterrestrial biological entity. And it goes into a description of the grays, no doubt. Let's see if we can find something else interesting. This is cleansing the area. Once all material has been removed from the secured site, the immediate area will be thoroughly inspected to make sure that all traces of extraterrestrial technology have been removed. In the case of a crash, the surrounding area will be thoroughly gone over several times to ensure that nothing has been overlooked. The search area involved may vary according to local conditions at the discretion of the officer in charge. When the officer in charge is satisfied that no further evidence of the event remains at the site, it may be evacuated. Yeah.
Yeah, receiving and handling. This on page 16, it looks like they're showing us a picture of where they put the Ark of the Covenant at the end of Raiders.
Yeah.
Got this box. It's a box within a box within a box.
It's pretty neat, though. I mean, let's say it's real.
Yeah, I'm
pretty
game.
Amazing document.
That'd be pretty cool.
But let's say it's not real. It's a damn amazing piece of work to look like an official document. It really does.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I don't know, man. That one, I mean, of course, it plays into the whole MJ-12 thing. I don't know. That one looks much better than the original MJ-12 document.
Yeah. Have you seen page 20? So if you go to page 20, you have diagrams of the different types of UFOs observed.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, one of them looks like a weather balloon.
Oh, yeah, it does, actually.
Hey, we're going to camouflage ourselves when we go visit Earth. What should we? What ship should we use? Use that weather balloon right over there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the Doctor Who's TARDIS. So it's pretty neat. Listeners, check out, if you want to look at this special operations manual from the government, just go to specialoperationsmanual.com and you can find scanned images of these photographs that were originally mailed to Don Berliner. It's pretty amazing, regardless of what it is.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's good stuff in here. Ooh, page 23, section 32. Balloons. It's like they wrote it for me.
They did write that section for you. They knew someday you would be looking at this.
Well, they cover, other things in this book that are really interesting, like the identification criteria. And then they have aircraft, balloons, meteors, stars or planets, optical phenomena.
The thing looks very well thought out.
Yeah, and so put together with those little metal, those metal, instead of using stitching on the side to bind it, it's one of those metal things like you get from the back to school aisle in Walmart. I guess this is 1957, so it's like Kmart.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Or S-Mart.
Shop Smart. Shop S-Smart.
So that's the MJ-12 story. That's the continuation of the Roswell flying saucer crash. More information to reinforce this. There's a Air Force information intelligence officer, former intelligence officer Richard Doty, who met with Linda Howe and claimed that all of this was real. But then some people question who he really is. Is he a Air Force misinformation officer, or is it something he's done on his own? Who knows? But that's maybe another story for another podcast. I don't know. But there's so many things that keep this story going. Some of them look very good, like this special operations manual. When you see this kind of stuff, it makes it difficult to refute, and all the people that have come forward. But I don't know. Pretty amazing story. I'm still not convinced there's this mass United States government conspiracy, UFO cover-up, and crash saucers. I'll have to see a lot more than what I've seen so far or read.
Yeah, the degree of competency that would be necessary for a cover-up like that, I haven't seen in our government. Maybe it was different back in the 40s and 50s.
No, but I mean, it would be still going on today, would it not?
Yeah,
but maybe I'm assuming if 66 or whatever it was, 16 flying saucers crashed between 1947 and 1952 in a 5-year span, how many have crashed since 1952?
Well, Bob got fired from quality control, so they've been doing much better.
Well, I don't know, man. I hope they came up with some new, warp technology or whatever they use to traverse the stars.
Yeah, I mean, if you get taken
what's that come up to? How many average year there? About 3 a year? 3 point, what? 3 point, slightly over 3 a year, right?
Yeah. Well, they're probably sitting there going, well, we're pretty sure that this design change where we took the brake out and just put 2 gas pedals in isn't working for us. Yeah. So that's probably what the problem is.
So between 47 and 52, an average of 3 flying saucers have crashed around the world. 60, according to that webpage, 66 alien bodies have been recovered and 1 live alien. Now, since 1952, average of 3 a year, or let's just say the last 75 years, that's 150 flying saucers that would have crashed between 1947 and now. No, that would be 225, right? 3 per year, 75 times 3.
Yeah, I mean, if it was keeping up at that rate, but maybe they fixed, like I said, maybe they fixed whatever the issue was that caused them to crash.
But I mean, still, we're talking an enormous number of crash flying saucers. They all crashed in remote areas that they could go in and cover up and recover without anyone knowing.
Yeah, Barbara, the receptionist at the funeral home's going, what do you mean we got to order another one of those little tiny coffins? How many does that make this month? Well, ever since that other ship crashed. Another 17.
Yeah. I mean, there are some amazing things that are out there to make you want to believe, but I'm still, unfortunately, I'm just not convinced,
Yeah, I'd like to keep on this a little bit more. There's just so much to research here. There's a 2005 paper that was put out by Bruce Maccabee called Hawk Tells. It's a supplement to Exempt from Disclosure, that Robert Collins book from 2005. So there's a lot of really interesting information about the Air Force, Richard Doty, and some other folks in the Air Force who were part of the disinformation campaign, some of which who I presume went on the record in both this article by Bruce Maccabee and the book by Robert Collins. So,
well, now that's true, and I think that will be a story for another day.
Yeah, a lot of information.
Another podcast, but I mean that is true. Richard Doty claims that he's an intelligence officer. I know he did some kind of odd things, but you have to ask yourself, and he frequents these UFO conventions. Now that he's retired from the Air Force, I mean, he's a personality in the UFO conventions. I've seen documentaries where they point him out. In fact, there's a pretty cool movie called Mirage Men, documentary about that. Listeners, if you get a chance, check it out. But I don't know, is this something he did on his own, or was it sanctioned by the United States Air Force? Was it sanctioned by just one group of people, or is this some deep government conspiracy thing again? I have my doubts. I'm not saying that Richard Doty didn't do these things about the disinformation or some of that. I'm just not convinced that it's some, like, from the highest, deepest levels of our government, something sanctioned.
Yeah, it may have just been an Air Force group of guys who got together to play games on the weekend and just started making this stuff up.
That's what I think. I think the guy gets a kick out of these telling people these stories, and hey, I'm an Air Force intelligence officer. Yeah, all the Roswell stuff's true. We have crash flying saucers. Here's some documents, but they allegedly took Linda Howe in there and showed her a bunch of stuff, promised there would be some videos and stuff to follow, which of course never materialized. I just wonder, is it just something he did as a pastime? Or just, playing some jokes on some people.
There's this physicist called Dale Graff where a lot of this stuff supposedly originates, and he has a direct connection. He's a civilian physicist with the Air Force FTD division, or was, and had a small contract to the SRI research team, and that's that remote viewing research team headed by Hal Puthoff, I think. Yeah, in order to test the Soviet hypothesis that PSI was transmitted via ELF, extremely low frequency.
Another subject for
another day. There's just so much here. It's a lot to go through, and all of these have ties that go back to MJ-12.
Yeah, and we will continue looking at things around the government cover-up and the government conspiracy. I mean, this is just something we decided to touch on because it's one big piece of the conspiracy pie that emerged shortly after the whole story about the Roswell cover-up broke. I mean, the first book was published in 1980. The first television special, In Search of with Leonard Nimoy, had Jesse Marcel on it. So we're talking these documents, these MJ-12 documents emerged just a few years after those books and a few other books that started being published on it. So, it's a big part of the story of the government conspiracy cover-up.
Yeah, I want all this stuff to be true, and that's my problem. I want it to be true, so I'm very, very hard on it when it comes through and when it comes into my scope. When I see stuff that just doesn't add up, that's when I'm like, all right, I don't want to get fooled. I don't want to be hoodwinked. And it feels like at least some of these MJ-12 documents are clearly fabricated.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like especially the Harry S. Truman signature. It's just it's impossible to refute the evidence that is fake.
Yep.
I mean, no one signs their name the same way, exactly the same way, with exactly the same proportions more than once. And
alien robots do.
Alien robots. Good point. That's a good.
Could
point.
be a rubber stamp signature.
About that. No, back in those days they didn't do that. They said these days, that may be, a rubber stamp or just the way electronic documents are done now. They said that would be easier to believe if that document actually originated now as opposed to in the 1940s.
I think something's off with the president. Why's that? Well, when I went in to have him sign some documents, he said this: "My name is Harry S. Truman. I will sign this document."
Yeah.
And then I heard a servo motor. Chicka, 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 chicka.
Yeah. I never thought about an android replacement of the president. And no wonder he would want to authorize. I mean, if he was an android replacement put there by the aliens, of course he would want to cover it up. Yeah. They don't want the public knowing about this stuff.
Those weren't pin.
That's why it's above top secret.
Yeah, those weren't pin marks off to the side of his signature. Those were oil leaks from his arm.
You know what? That's actually proof that it's real.
It's proof.
The fact that the signatures are exactly the same.
Exactly. It's the aliens.
Yeah. I think my thing about the whole conspiracy is that I've read a lot of documentation. I've read stuff from J. Allen Hynek pre-1980, before this government cover-up story began, before Jesse Marcel and Stanton Friedman. The attitude of the government and the very early government, the declassified documents, I think point to them being very concerned. And then we see the 1950s, whenever the huge UFO flap occurred and the UFOs are over the Capitol and the phone lines at the Pentagon are jammed. They can't get through. They can't make a phone call at the Pentagon because so many people are calling around because of these UFOs over the city. That's when the government became very concerned and decided to start demystifying UFOs. That was part of the new doctrine, was to demystify UFOs, deny UFOs exist, because they were worried the public was getting hysteric and that the Soviets and the Communist Party could somehow exploit that. And that's why we started ending up with the let's demystify it, let's deny and ridicule, which everybody talks about. That's not untrue. The denial and ridicule of UFO witnesses is a fact, but for different reasons.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'd hate to be a switchboard operator back then. It's like, man, if I get another one of these calls where I have to listen to somebody going saying, "Aliens, it's aliens,
it's aliens, y'all,
it's coming down to get me." I'm quitting tomorrow if this keeps up.
All right, man. Well, you got anything else you need to add on this episode, Jimmy?
No, I'm leaving it open because there's just so much to read. I mean, I think the original MJ-12 documents is enough there for me to lean heavily on the side of skeptical.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that there isn't something going on somewhere. I think there's a lot of things in those early years directly from military men who say they observed things either directly or had it reported to them by reliable military pilots in particular, of craft that were doing some extraordinary things for that time and even for today. And we still see that going on today with military aircraft pilots who are seeing these things. And we're getting more and more evidence as our surveillance equipment gets more sophisticated. So it really, that's the one thing that keeps this whole topic open for me.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like I said earlier, I fully believe there's something to the UFO phenomenon. I think there's something to it. There's too many true stories about physical traces being left behind by these craft, or people's vision being affected because it looks like they looked into a welder. I mean, there's just a lot of stories and sightings, corroborated with other people that are unrelated, of some extraordinary things. And the government knew that. They were much more open back in the 40s and early 50s until the Robertson panel, when they decided, hey, we got to tamp this thing down. We need to stop talking about it with the public. We just need to blow it off and say there's nothing to it. And that's exactly what they did. I think it was quite clear they were very concerned at one time. And I think there's been evidence sent to the government. For instance, who was the astronaut? Gordon, who was that?
Cooper?
Not Gordon Lightfoot.
Cooper?
Yeah, Gordon Cooper. He talks about the film that he saw. That his crew took that day of a flying saucer landing there, and it disappeared. Does it still exist? Is it in some secret vault? Is there a group of people that sit around and talk about this and we're being visited and we got to keep all this information? I don't know. Maybe. But
to be continued.
Yeah, we'll keep digging into this. That's for sure. Well, all right. Well, before we get out of here, I'd like to remind everyone, please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It helps other people find the show, just like you did. If you'd like to reach out to the show, our contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Tell us what you think about the UFO conspiracy. Do you think the government is covering up flying saucers and that MJ-12 exists, that men in black are covering up alien technology and crash saucers? Do we have some aliens in the freezer? Do we have a live one in a cage somewhere poking and prodding him?
Is Gordon Lightfoot really Gordon Cooper? What other crazy conspiracies are going on in the world? I don't know.
Let us know. Firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. We'd love to hear from you. All right. With all that being said, I guess I'm going to get out of here. This is Stephen Hawk signing out, and we'll see you next week.
And this is Jimmy Coe. Keep your eyes to the skies and your feet on the ground. We'll catch you next week.
Gordon Cooper is Gordon Lightfoot.
Could you imagine Gordon Cooper singing Gordon Lightfoot songs?
And maybe instead of that. What was it? The Ella Fitzgerald.
Yeah, how would he sing
capsule. The Mercury 7 capsule.
it's
flying through space on my third orbit. I saw some lights in the sky.
I was quite high.
All right.
Later, Gator. That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account at firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. If you'd like to support the show, consider becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/cosmicsponge, where you get access to exclusive content, including our Weird Wonders news and stories released every week. To explore everything Cosmic Sponge has to offer, including other ways to support the show, head on over to our website at www.cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.